My name is Lena Ray, I'm 26, and until last year, I thought I had a normal family. I live in a quiet Midwestern town, working long shifts at a diner during the day and cleaning offices at night. Life wasn't easy, but it was mine, simple, steady, and peaceful. Then came that one Saturday morning that flipped everything upside down. My parents, Elaine and Richard, showed up at my apartment looking cheerful and a little too well-dressed for a casual visit. My mom held my sister Tara's baby, little Milo, wrapped in a blue blanket. Tara wasn't with them, which wasn't strange. She'd been traveling again, which was code for disappearing into her own chaos. Mom smiled and said, "Lena, sweetheart, could you watch Milo for a few days? Your sister's sorting out a few things, and your father and I are taking a short trip." I asked, "Where are you going?" She laughed softly. "Barcelona, just for a week or two. We need a break." They left in a hurry, too much of a hurry. I remember Mom's perfume still hanging in the air when I closed the door. I looked down at Milo, wide-eyed and drooling, clutching my finger. I thought, okay, a few days. I can do this. But the next morning, I found an envelope on my kitchen counter that I hadn't noticed before. My name was on it, Lena. Inside was a short note written in my mom's neat handwriting. "Sweetheart, we've decided to stay in Spain for a while. Don't worry about Milo. You're wonderful with him. We'll figure things out soon. Love, Mom and Dad." No phone call. No explanation. No return date. My chest went cold. I called them both, straight to voicemail. I tried Tara's number too, disconnected. It felt like my whole family had vanished overnight, leaving me holding the one thing I wasn't prepared for, someone else's child. The next days blurred together. I barely slept, barely ate. Between bottle feedings and crying fits, I kept reading that note, hoping I'd miss something, a clue, a reason, but there was nothing, just empty promises and silence. I called my mom's best friend, Donna, and she said, "Oh, honey, didn't they tell you? They sold their house before leaving. Said they were done with small-town life." That's when it hit me. They weren't coming back. I sat on my couch that night, holding Milo close, listening to his small breaths. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or laugh at how cruel it all was. My parents had started a new life across the ocean and left me to clean up the mess, like always. Only this time, it wasn't just a mess. It was a baby, innocent, heavy in my arms, and completely my responsibility now. Milo was asleep on the couch when I sat on the floor beside him, scrolling through every old contact I had for Tara. Her number was still the same in my phone, but when I called, the line cut off with that flat robotic voice. "This number is no longer in service." I tried again, then again, as if maybe the third time would somehow connect me to her. Nothing. I sent an email, a text, even a message to an old friend of hers. No one replied. Every dead end made my stomach twist tighter. Tara had always been the kind of person who floated through life, while the rest of us cleaned up her wake. The golden child with 1,000 excuses. Rehab, recovery, relapse, repeat. That was her pattern. She'd promise change, then vanish again the moment someone believed her. Now, I was sitting in my tiny apartment surrounded by baby bottles, diapers, and bills, wondering if she even knew her son was still here, or if she even cared. I tried reaching my parents again. Calls went unanswered. I left voicemails that grew shorter each day, my voice breaking only once near the end. When the phone stayed silent, I switched to email. Still nothing. Weeks crawled by. My savings thinned fast. Diapers, formula, wipes, and endless little things that added up. I stretched every dollar, but it wasn't enough. I sold a few things, a bracelet my mom gave me, my old TV, even a coffee table I used to love. At night, when Milo cried, I'd rock him and whisper, "It's okay, buddy. I've got you." But deep down, I wasn't sure how long I could keep saying that. One morning, as I was taking the trash out, my neighbor Mrs. Carver stopped me. She was older, nosy in that small-town way, but kind. She asked how the baby was, then said casually, "You know, your folks sold their place pretty quick, huh? Didn't think they'd go through with it." I froze. "What did you say?" "They sold it right before leaving," she went on. "Told the realtor they were moving overseas for good." "Didn't they tell you?" The air felt heavy. I muttered something like, "I guess they forgot." But inside, it was like someone had yanked the floor out from under me. So that was it. They hadn't left for a short trip. They'd walked away, from the house, from me, from everything. That night, after putting Milo to bed, I sat in the dark living room and looked at the empty spot where my coffee table used to be. My parents were gone, Tara was a ghost, and the only thing that felt real was the soft sound of Milo's breathing. I whispered, "They're not coming back, are they?" He didn't answer, of course. Just sighed in his sleep, and that tiny sound broke me in half. The nights began to blur together. Milo woke every few hours, crying with that sharp, desperate sound that cut straight through the dark. I'd stumble from the couch, half asleep, heat a bottle, and hold him until his small body softened against mine. Sometimes he'd stop crying only to start again a few minutes later, his voice thin and trembling. By morning, I'd barely caught an hour of sleep. My uniform smelled like formula and detergent, my eyes burned, and I was always late. At first, my boss tried to be patient. "You okay, Lena?" he'd ask, handing me another stack of dishes to clean. I'd nod, pretending I was fine. But the truth was, I couldn't keep up. I was running between work, daycare applications I couldn't afford, and endless grocery trips for things I didn't even know babies needed. Then came the day I showed up 40 minutes late. Milo had spit up all over my shirt, and the bus broke down halfway to work. When I finally arrived, the manager didn't yell. He just looked tired. "I can't keep covering for you," he said. "You've missed too many shifts." I wanted to argue, to explain everything, but my throat closed up. I just nodded and walked out with my last paycheck, clutching it like it could somehow solve everything. Rent was due that same week. The landlord left another pink slip on my door, warning of eviction. I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out which bill I could skip this time: electric, rent, or food. That night, I rocked Milo on the edge of my bed, the light from the street lamps slicing through the blind. His eyes were so calm, trusting, like he had no idea the world outside was falling apart. I brushed my thumb across his tiny cheek and whispered, "You didn't ask for any of this." Still, I couldn't help the bitterness curling in my chest. My parents were probably sitting somewhere sunny, sipping coffee by the sea, proud of their new fresh start. They'd always spoiled Tara, always found reasons for her mistakes, and now they'd tied me to the wreckage she left behind. The anger came quietly at first, like a whisper that wouldn't stop. Every sleepless night made it louder. Every time Milo cried, it reminded me of the silence on the other end of the phone when I tried to call them. One morning, as the sun came up and painted the walls pale gold, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked like someone else, hollow eyes, messy hair, shadows under my skin. I didn't even recognize the girl who used to dream about traveling, finishing school, starting over somewhere new. Now, all I had was a baby that wasn't mine, a handful of unpaid bills, and the echo of my parents' laughter as they walked away from everything I was left to carry. 3 months passed like a fog that never lifted. Every day felt the same: feeding, cleaning, rocking Milo to sleep, and waking up to do it all again. I didn't count the days anymore. I just tried to survive them. One afternoon, I came home from the corner store and found a white envelope on my doormat. My name was written across it in my mother's careful handwriting. For a second, my chest tightened. I hadn't seen her handwriting since they left. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The smell of my mother's perfume still clung to it, faint but familiar. The letter began lightly, almost like a postcard. She wrote about the ocean, the weather, the food. She said Barcelona was a dream, full of sunsets, sangria, and second chances. She mentioned how she and my dad were finally finding peace after years of stress. I kept reading, waiting for something that sounded like an apology, some acknowledgement of what they'd done. But it never came. Instead, the letter ended with one small line that burned into my mind. "Take care of Milo, you're better at that kind of thing." That was it. "No, we'll be back soon." "No, we're sorry." Just a casual reminder that I was now responsible for their grandchild, while they sipped wine on another continent. I sat on the couch, the paper trembling in my hand. Milo was lying on a blanket nearby, chewing on a soft toy. His little giggle broke through the quiet, sweet and innocent. My throat tightened. I wanted to cry, to scream, to tear the letter apart, but I couldn't move. For the first time, the weight of everything hit me all at once. They had planned this. My parents hadn't acted out of confusion or panic. They had made a choice. They had chosen their comfort over their family. They had left me behind like a problem they didn't want to deal with. Tears started to fall, slow and heavy. I pressed the letter to my chest, then finally tore it in half. The sound was soft but final. The pieces drifted to the floor like scraps of something that used to mean love. I knelt beside Milo and picked him up. He looked at me with those wide brown eyes, trusting and calm. My voice came out rough as I whispered, "It's just us now, okay?" In that moment, something inside me changed. I stopped waiting for them to come back. I stopped hoping for explanations. I wasn't going to let them decide who I was anymore. I folded the torn pieces of the letter and threw them into the trash. Then I looked around the small apartment, messy, tired, but mine. They could keep their sunsets and sangria. I had something stronger. I had Milo, and I had the fire to keep going, no matter what they'd done. Rain hit the windows so hard it sounded like small stones. Milo was finally asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling under the thin blanket. I was sitting on the floor, sorting through overdue bills, when a loud knock echoed through the apartment. It was almost midnight. My heart jumped. Nobody came by at that hour. I waited, thinking maybe it was the wind, but then came another knock, firmer this time. I stood slowly, my pulse quick. The peephole showed a tall man, soaked through, water dripping from his hair. He didn't look dangerous, just lost. Still, I hesitated before opening the door a few inches. "Are you Lena Ray?" he asked, his voice rough but steady. I nodded, gripping the door. "Who's asking?" "My name's Grant," he said. "I'm looking for Tara." The name hit me like a slap. "Tara isn't here," I said carefully. "She's gone." He looked confused. "Gone? What do you mean?" "She told me she lived here." "She doesn't," I said. "Hasn't in a long time." For a moment, he just stared past me into the small apartment. His eyes landed on the crib beside the couch. Is that a baby?" I froze. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "Is that Milo?" Every muscle in my body tensed. "How do you know that name?" He swallowed hard. "Because I'm his father." The world tilted a little. I opened the door wider, still unsure what to do. "You need to explain that," I said quietly. He stepped inside, dripping water onto the rug, eyes wide and shining. "Tara told me he died," he said, his voice shaking. "She said there were complications. I thought my son was gone." I stared at him, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to believe him. The other part screamed that it couldn't be true. My sister had lied plenty of times. But this? Telling someone their baby was dead? Even for her, it felt impossible. I motioned for him to sit, still keeping a little distance. Milo stirred in his sleep, and Grant's eyes softened. "He looks just like her," he whispered. I folded my arms. "You said Tara told you he was dead. When was that?" "About 8 months ago," he said. "I came back from Oregon, tried to find her. Your parents told me she'd moved out of state to heal. They said I should move on." His words sank deep. My parents had lied to me, but this was worse. They'd lied to him, too, and about something unforgivable. We sat in silence, the storm pounding outside. He finally looked up at me. "I don't understand why they'd do that." I did, though, because it was what they always did. Twist the truth, hide the mess, and let someone else carry the weight. For the first time, I realized it wasn't just me they'd betrayed. It was everyone who ever trusted them. Grant came back the next evening. The rain had stopped, but the sky still hung low and gray, heavy with that quiet after a storm. Milo was sitting in his high chair, smearing mashed peas across the tray, when Grant knocked. This time, I didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, looking calmer, more certain. He brought coffee and a stack of papers tucked under his arm. "I've been trying to make sense of everything," he said. "There's something you need to know." We sat at the small kitchen table. He laid out a few folded documents, hospital forms, messages, an old photo of Tara holding a newborn. "When Tara got pregnant, your parents wanted me gone. They said she wasn't ready to be a mother and needed peace. I tried to fight it, but your dad called me one night and told me I was only making things worse. He said if I cared about her, I'd leave her alone." He looked down at his hands. "So I did. I left town. I thought it was temporary. When I came back months later, they said she'd moved on. And then Tara told me Milo died." I didn't speak. My chest felt hollow. The lies stretched further than I'd imagined. Not just about Spain, not just about the baby. My parents had been weaving their stories for years, controlling everything and everyone around them. Grant's voice was low. "They didn't just take my son from me. They used both of us. I think they wanted Tara to seem innocent, like she hadn't messed up again. I was just the mistake they erased." I pressed my palms against the table, trying to steady my breath. My whole life flashed behind my eyes, every moment I'd covered for Tara, every time my parents called her fragile and called me responsible. I'd carried their secrets, defended them, believed them. And they'd used me too, the same way they used him. Grant reached across the table. "You didn't know. None of this is your fault." But I couldn't accept that. I'd spent years keeping quiet, trusting them, thinking loyalty meant love. It hit me that I'd been nothing but their safety net. Whenever Tara fell, they threw me underneath to break her fall. I looked at Milo in his high chair, his face sticky with peas, smiling up at us like the world had never hurt him. The thought of them ever touching him again made my stomach twist. Grant's voice pulled me back. "We should find out everything. No more secrets." I nodded slowly. They took too much from both of us. It ends now. For the first time, I felt something sharper than grief, a fire that started deep in my chest. I wasn't the quiet daughter anymore. They had built their peace on my silence, and I was done giving it to them. The next week passed in silence, broken only by the soft hum of the refrigerator and Milo's laughter echoing through the small apartment. I moved through each day with quiet purpose. No more waiting for calls that would never come. No more hoping for apologies that wouldn't mean a thing. When Milo napped, I sat at the kitchen table with my old laptop and began searching. I didn't know much about legal terms, but I knew one thing. If my parents ever came back, I wasn't letting them take him. Not after everything. I found a local family lawyer named Carla Denton, a woman known for handling custody and neglect cases. Her office was 2 bus rides away. I scheduled an appointment under the name L. Ray, keeping it vague. When I met her, she listened without judgment, her eyes steady and sharp. Do you have any proof they left the child in your care without consent or support? She asked. I slid the folded letter from my mother across the desk. They wrote this before leaving the country, I said. She read it slowly, her mouth tightening. That'll do, she murmured. Then she looked at me. We can start filing for guardianship. It'll take time, but you have a strong case. I nodded, feeling something solid inside me for the first time in months. A plan. Back home, Grant helped gather what we needed. Copies of the note, the neighbor's statement, Milo's medical records, and receipts showing I'd paid for everything since the day they disappeared. Each piece felt like a brick, building a wall they couldn't climb over. At night, after Milo fell asleep, I'd sit beside the crib, whispering to him, "You're safe, no matter what happened." His tiny hand would curl around my finger, and it reminded me why I couldn't afford to slip. Carla called one afternoon to confirm the papers were ready for filing. "Once this goes through," she said, "you'll have full guardianship. No one can take him from you without your consent." Her words settled over me like armor. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about what came next. Legal papers would protect Milo, but it wasn't enough. I wanted them to know, not through shouting or threats, but through silence that cut deeper than words. Grant asked what I planned to do when they eventually showed up. I looked at him and said, "I'll let them see exactly what they gave up." He nodded, understanding. We didn't need revenge that made noise. We needed one that lasted. Every signed document, every stamped page was another thread pulled from the web of lies they'd spun. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate was too easy. What I felt was colder, a steady calm that came from knowing the truth and holding all the power they thought I'd never have. For the first time, I was no longer the daughter they could control. I was the woman they'd never see coming. The knock came on a bright Sunday morning, almost a year after the night they left. Milo was playing on the floor with a stack of colorful blocks while sunlight spilled across the carpet. I was making coffee, humming to myself, when the sound echoed again, sharp, impatient. I wasn't expecting anyone. Grant had gone to the store, and neighbors usually called before stopping by. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the door, and froze when I saw them through the peephole. My parents. They stood there like ghosts pulled out of the past, thinner, older, their faces drawn and pale. My mother clutched her purse like she was afraid someone might take it from her. My father's shirt was wrinkled, his shoes scuffed, his usual confidence gone. For a moment, I didn't move. My chest felt tight, but not from fear, from disbelief that they'd actually come back. I opened the door slowly. "Lena," my mother said, her voice too sweet, like sugar poured over rust. "Honey, you look wonderful." My father gave a small nod. "It's been too long." I leaned against the doorframe. "Almost a year," I said flatly. They exchanged glances, then my mother's smile widened. "We wanted to surprise you. Things didn't quite work out overseas. The economy, the rent, you know how it is. But we're home now, back where we belong." I didn't answer. She glanced past me and saw Milo sitting on the rug. Her voice softened instantly. "There's our little angel." My hand tightened on the door. "He's not yours to call that anymore." Her smile faltered. "Lena, don't be like that. We just want to see him. You've done such a good job. We're ready to take over now, give you your life back." The calm that rose inside me surprised me. I thought I'd feel rage, maybe tears, but instead there was only stillness, cold and clear. "My life's just fine," I said. My father stepped forward, trying to sound firm. "We're his grandparents. You can't keep him from us." I met his gaze without blinking. "I can, and I will." Their faces shifted, confusion mixing with frustration. My mother's tone turned pleading. "Lena, sweetheart, we made mistakes. We were under pressure, we thought." I cut her off. "You thought I'd always clean up after you. You thought I'd break." Milo let out a small laugh behind me, smacking 2 blocks together. The sound filled the silence like a reminder of who really mattered. My mother's eyes flicked toward him again, but I stepped into her view. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't look at him like you remember how to love." They didn't know what to say. The same people who once controlled every room they entered now looked small, uncertain. I didn't invite them in. Instead, I said, "You should go." And for the first time in my life, they did, without a single word. They came back again 3 days later, this time with Tara trailing behind them. She looked different, thinner, tired, her hair a mess of faded blonde strands. My mother had called earlier, asking if we could talk properly over dinner. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe I wanted them to see what they had turned me into, not broken, not begging, just done. Grant sat beside me at the table, quiet but solid. Milo slept in his room, a soft hum from the baby monitor filling the silence. My parents brought takeout as if it were a family reunion. The smell of food barely covered the tension. We ate in silence for a few minutes before my mother began. "Lena, darling, we've made mistakes, but we're here now. We want to make things right. Let's just start over." I placed my fork down carefully. "Start over?" I repeated. "You mean pretend none of this happened?" My father leaned forward, his voice firm. You've made your point, Lena. We've suffered too, you know. We lost our savings, our home. I interrupted, sliding a thick folder across the table. You lost money. I lost everything else. He frowned, opening the folder. Inside were copies of the note they'd left, the guardianship papers, and every receipt from the past year. Diapers, formula, doctor visits. What's this supposed to prove? He asked. That you left me with your grandchild and disappeared, I said. That I had to prove you existed just to protect him. Tara's eyes filled with tears. Lena, I didn't know they told Grant. I turned toward her. You told him his son was dead. She flinched, covering her face. Mom said it was better that way. I didn't think. My mother's voice sharpened. Don't blame her. She was fragile, you know that. We were all under stress. I laughed softly, shaking my head. You always have an excuse. Tara was too fragile. Dad was too proud. You were too tired. And me? I was always just there to fix it. My father's temper cracked. Watch your tone, young lady. I met his glare with steady eyes. You don't get to talk to me like that anymore. Silence settled over the table, heavy and final. My mother tried again, her tone soft and pleading. We just want to be a family again. I gathered the papers and stacked them neatly. I'm Milo's legal guardian. The court agreed months ago. He's safe here, with people who don't lie to him. Tara sobbed quietly. My parents sat frozen, as if they didn't understand how this version of me existed. I stood and looked at them one by one. You left your family for your freedom. Don't come back now pretending it's love. They didn't answer. For the first time, the silence belonged to me. When the plates were cleared and the silence turned thick enough to choke on, I stood up. No one moved. My parents stared at the table like they might find a way to rewrite the night by staring hard enough. Tara sat slumped in her chair, eyes red, hands twisted in her lap. I didn't yell. There was nothing left worth raising my voice over. It's time for you to go, I said quietly. My mother looked up, her lips trembling. Lena, please. We can fix this. I shook my head once. You can't fix something you never meant to keep. Grant opened the door behind them. The hallway light spilled in, bright and cold. For a moment, they just stood there unsure, like people who had walked into the wrong house. Then my father muttered something about how ungrateful I was and stepped out first. My mother hesitated, turning as if she wanted to touch my arm, but I stepped back. She lowered her hand and followed him. Tara lingered last, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. Some things didn't deserve words. When the door shut, the sound echoed softly through the apartment. I leaned against it, feeling the weight slide off my shoulders like sand slipping through open fingers. The air felt lighter, the space somehow larger. Grant came over and wrapped his arms around me without saying anything. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for a year. Milo's small cry came from the bedroom, soft and sleepy. I went to him, lifted him into my arms, and felt the warmth of his little body against mine. His head rested on my shoulder, his breathing even and steady. I looked around the dim room, the worn furniture, the old curtains, the faint smell of baby lotion. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was ours. Days turned into weeks again, but this time the rhythm felt different. There was peace instead of dread. Grant started a small job nearby. I found part-time work I could do from home. Milo learned to stand on wobbly legs, his laughter filling every corner of the apartment. Each sound reminded me that I had survived every lie, every storm. One afternoon, months later, my phone buzzed. The sender's name froze me for half a second. The message preview read only the first few words. We're not doing well here. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pressed delete. No reply, no hesitation. Just silence. That was the ending they'd earned. Not anger, not tears. Just absence. I looked over at Milo stacking blocks near the window, sunlight brushing across his hair. Grant handed me a cup of coffee, smiling faintly. And in that quiet moment, I realized my revenge had already happened. I was living the life they tried to destroy, steady, peaceful, free. And they were nothing but voices fading on the other side of a closed door. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end of this wild story. Imagine being left with your sister's baby while your parents run off to Spain, then acting like nothing happened they return. Crazy, right? But sometimes the best revenge is peace. If you felt this story, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more emotional stories. See you next time. Bye.